Discussion about issues concerning certain underlooked communities is directly correlated to their relevancy in this internet age. Hence, their resurgence in certain months or in particular time periods in a year. It's only when they go viral or miraculously capture the sought attention span of our current generation is when they are given the spotlight for a short period only to be forgotten by the next day. Using all those buzzwords online to show their support is the only extent majority of them choose to do. A desperate effort in the hopes to scream to the world saying, "Hey look, I am doing my part," which, as we all know, is the best way to solve huge issues like that. That's how people who are against those movements are going to change, by looking at an acronym. I mean, all these white peoples are taking seconds out of their excruciating life to type these handful letters in their social media profiles must be up to something. Maybe Black Lives Do Matter. Which doesn't even last for a long period of time. And even if it does, that isn't going to help in the slightest way. The people who you dearly want to change aren't going to bat an eye to that. But they don't want those issues to be solved. That would mean they wouldn't get any attention for showing their so-called support. Their whole basis for aiding this movement would go to a waste. Those problems being dealt with doesn't concern them. Hence, the usage of word discussion. At best, some of them bring awareness to those matters to the eyes and ears of the masses. Still, the pattern in which they do it makes all of that null and void. It just becomes a trend that people foolishly follow and then throw shade at all those greedy companies who try to profit from that, forgetting that those corporations are only doing that because it increases their financial gain, which basically means there is a large number of people who are fooled by those marketing schemes. Anything that can't be monetized for their benefit doesn't concern them. Anything that is so in the past that it can't breach the shallow trending barriers doesn't interest the general public of our online world. The pain all those people went through in the past doesn't bother them a bit. Their limited pity help can't extend that back in time. All of it is just set aside, being forced to stay in the dark. Until, through the means of moving pictures, those underexposed side of our long-gone society gets unveiled, revealing all the horrid and harrowing extent some people's ancestors went to. And if they're portrayed with justice, it makes up for a gripping affair, one that can't be forgotten so easily, leaving us with a long-lasting mark and a life-changing experience. A film of such nature is the 2018's The Nightingale, written and directed by Jennifer Kent, widely known for a 2014 psychological horror masterpiece, The Babadook, which is one of my favorites in that genre, being amongst a handful of titles that made me interested in that subgroup of films. But Kent didn't capitalize on the success of that by making a sequel to it or make an entirely similar sort of film. Well, there are similarities between these two titles. Even though they aren't in the same genre, the viewing experience is very much alike, and the manner in which the subject matters are dealt with are too, with both of them being based on Australia, the birthplace of the director. And in The Nightingale, she uses the historical events of that region to talk about a lesser known past about certain groups of people, bringing their stories and hardships to the perception of a larger audience, so their struggle aren't forgotten, becoming a long-lost tale of some sort, and all their trials and tribulations doesn't end in vain. Narratives of this fashion generally aren't easy to watch, always leaving the viewer with uneasy and unsettling emotions, and The Nightingale is no different. However, not in the process we are accustomed to. Even though this film is one of the most disturbing piece of media I have seen in a long while, leaving me distraught for days after viewing. And I don't say that lightly, as I have seen some devastating films. Nevertheless, this tale of revenge does dabble its feet on the cliches of that trope, but doesn't rely on it to make up for a pretty basic plot. It uses those to subvert the expectations of the person watching, which is a signature move of the director. She used the same system in The Babadook too, luring in the audience to think that they are in for a jump scare filled horror about a wicked and heinous looking being, when in reality, it is the exact opposite of it. Kent isn't interested in showcasing something ghoulish looking to catch some cheap scares. She is after the real horror of what humanity is capable of. But more on that someday later, as The Nightingale captures that brutal and barbaric nature with a relative ease without being overly explicit or using a ton of gore to send across its hard-to-digest message. I vividly remember the first time I was watching this film and how I almost gave up on it as it was getting too overbearing for my senses, which in retrospect meant it was achieving its desired effect. The point that Kent wanted to get across was delivered with admirable efficiency. So, first of all, let's get into what it does, then we can move on to how it does that. This is how a brief synopsis of the plot will go like. Set in 1825, around the time the country was going through the Black War, we follow the story of Claire Carroll, an Irish convict working as a servant for the colonial force, who were led by Lieutenant Hawkins. And while his superior was visiting there to see if he is fit for promotion, Claire, who goes by the nickname Nightingale, is commanded to sing and serve for the men. Shortly after that unpleasant scenario, she goes to Hawkins to inquire about when she is going to get her letter of recommendation that would free her, her husband Eden, and their daughter Bridget. But Hawkins demands her to sing a special song just for himself. However, Claire persists about getting that letter, and that leads to him sexually assaulting her for her apparent discourteous behavior. Eden is totally unaware about all this stuff, only noticing that she has been hurt somehow or by someone, focusing on acquiring that letter of freedom for his family for the better. Unluckily, he wasn't successful at persuading Hawkins to provide him with that, all while trying to keep his calm, which is broken by nighttime as he gets in a brawl with him and a couple of other officers, which catches the attention of the visiting official who decides that Hawkins isn't fit for promotion, who tries to beg to him to take another look or give him one more chance to get away from that wretched place. When that doesn't work, he commands Roos and Diego to gather supplies and necessary or required arsenal and personnel for their journey to the town of Launceston, Tasmania, to negotiate his position to the officer. However, before departure, the trio decided to give Claire a visit, who, along with her husband, were trying to flee to fight for their freedom rather than stay in that unfathomable condition. This doesn't go well with Hawkins, who again sexually assaults Claire, while Eden is forced to witness, proclaiming that this was going on for a long time and that she enjoys it, making Eden rage, who is fighting for the life of his family, only to get shot after he tries to assault an officer. Or that's how Hawkins is going to justify the situation if he is ever questioned. He then bids Roos to do the same, and without any thought, he obliges, all while the baby is in the background crying uncontrollably, as Diego tries his best to calm her down, who is commanded to shut up the crying newborn, which results to him swinging the infant against the wall, killing her in the process, all while Claire is conscious to spectate the demise of her family. Diego is instructed to end her misery by killing her too, to finish what they started, but he hesitantly just knocks her unconscious with the tail end of his rifle. And this is how the film begins its tale of vengeance. Now, all of this doesn't sound or look easy to observe in any sense, and the film did receive various controversial remarks and numerous walkouts. It is extreme and graphic while it depicts themes of violence and a word that I replaced with sexual assault. Then why do I say that it uses the off-screen method when it comes to those topics? Well, allow me to explain some of the finer details of this film and how it goes about dealing with those subject matters, which is becoming something that I admire about Kent as a director. This whole ordeal takes place in the span of couple of days. There is hardly any jump cut between scenes, unless it's necessary, which basically means there isn't any sort of flashback sequence. It is pretty straightforward when it comes to its narrative. No recollection being used to showcase more unsavory situations. And even when those sort of scenes are upfront, they don't overstay their welcome. One of such instances is when Hawkins and his goons give the Carroll family a visit, where he says some stuff to rile up Eden. But it isn't implausible to say that the length of that assault period wasn't true. However, none of those scenes are shown to upset the viewer even more. One was enough, and him bringing it up doesn't seem highly unlikely. Neither is the time span, as we don't know the age of Bridget, whose death isn't stylized or shown in a gory manner for movie purposes. It isn't trying to be one of those gore-infested titles. It is going for a realistic point of view to this whole revenge-ridden character trope, and a very humane one at that too, that gets the audience behind the back of Claire. Not a protagonist by every means, as none of the characters in this film are noble in their ways. There is that blind hatred towards the natives, a belief spread by the colonists, which unfortunately Claire has fallen for, even though there is hardly any proof behind those remarks. Still, that doesn't stop Claire and Billy, a native guide, to have a mutual look of disgust towards each other. Another instance of background scenarios having an effect on our on-screen characters, where the natives are exploited for their local knowledge, otherwise treated as lesser beings. The doubt, if any, against the natives for all their apparent wrongdoings is clear in the next scene, as we see a couple of them being hanged, as Billy, aka Mangana, talks about how they took everything from them. Get caught and you'll get hanged. Try to run away and brace for being shot in the back. Live peacefully only to lose your land and being forced to slave away for the colonists. A feeling of ill will that Claire struggles to deal with, as she doubts everything that Mangana does, even though it's usually the fairer skins who are generally after her, while he is just trying to survive amidst helping her. From what we know, Claire has never got any trouble from the natives. She just dislikes them for all the rumors spread off-screen by groups of people who might be behind all of that. In another scene, we see that Roos got hold of a native woman leaving her young kid behind in that forest who is never seen again, which doesn't bode well with the viewer's imagination. No matter which outcome you can think of, it isn't a positive one. And after a while, it is almost confirmed that child was never found, as her mother is sought for basically doing nothing. A brief stint of backstory gives us depth to our characters who had harsh upbringing or childhood. From Claire, left alone to grow up on her own, while her mother walked herself to her grave, and Mangana having to watch his family being shot in front of him, and surviving members running away, leaving him behind to fend for himself, only to be forced to lead a white life by the colonists. With this being said, it doesn't mean that all of the natives were good-hearted, even though the whole film is usually shedding a light to all the atrocities committed by the oppressors. There are brief talks about how the natives deal with certain members of their tribes in a violent way, and there is that whole matter of Mangana despising every person with a white skin tone. However, some of those actions are somewhat justifiable. For example, when Uncle Charlie, the navigator for Hawkins, leading them to a mountain range so they are just stuck there. His reasoning behind that isn't made clear, but we all know why he sacrificed himself for the demise of his tormentors, to get back at them for taking away years of peaceful life of his people. An occasion that confirms the prolonged extent of oppression that Claire had to go through is when she stalls to shoot at Hawkins. You can see the fear in her eyes, freezing her in that spot. even though moments before that she was adamant to complete the task she came for, insisting Mangana to take her to him. But she is unable to get over that fear whenever she's around him. Until the ending segments of the film where she goes over to him, which by all means looks like she's going to confront him for all the savagery he incited on her and her family. However, the way she does that is vastly different than what I was expecting, overcoming her fright of him and touching some nerves about his emotional neglect and suppression. The man had some serious mommy issues, which was hinted in handful of previous scenes, with him not being able to stand crying of any manner, leading to the death of 2 young children, Eddie being the second victim. Claire took the conflict-free route, but Mangana had some other plans, who gets shot while killing Hawkins and Ruse, taking his revenge for what they did to Uncle Charlie and Claire. And her not doing so makes up for a very bittersweet ending. But it was pretty much clear she wasn't going to kill them. Murdering Diego took enough toll on her mental health. The ending, just like the whole film, is left for the viewer's imagination. Mangana is waiting for the light to take him, while Claire is basically a convict who just assisted in the slaughtering of 2 officers. It isn't hopeful, just like the entire story, and it was needed to be done like that. The uncertainty is what makes it so effective. It wasn't made for the entertainment of the person watching. It doesn't leave you with any optimistic emotions. It's all about people being stuck in distressing situations. Hawkins was held there by his superiors, so he does the same to the ones he sees beneath him. The harshness of their lives is shown very early in the film. A proper misogynistic environment where the young ones grow up but don't mature, with a distaste for girly stereotypes and other races, being groomed to keep that hostility alive in them, getting accustomed to those mentality to hurt anyone who doesn't look, talk, or think like them, gradually losing their innocence. Feeling of contempt that is so deep-rooted inside them that they don't even get bothered by being surrounded in all that ruthlessness, which makes the viewing experience almost intolerable. Yes, violence is prevalent throughout this film, but very less is shown and a lot is told. Visuals only used when necessary, otherwise relying on tales to tell the lesson about the inhumanity of mankind, letting the freedom of imagination take the best of the viewer, which is far more potent with its boundless possibilities than some blooded up scene, showing enough so we get an idea of what could have happened. It is immensely aggravating and agitating with its limited usage of visual ferocity. Imagine how bad it would have been if more was used. And now imagine how worse it was for the people living in that unfortunate timeline. And that's what I think Kent wanted this film to be. A reminder of those times. A reminder of those conditions some had to live through. A reminder of the pain of the unspoken.